Writers, yesterday I had an experience I'm pretty sure some of you have had as well. I found myself in an argument with my mom, and as we argued, I got so frustrated that at one point I was actually crying. Have you ever had that moment when you're really mad and you really want to get your point across, but you can't? This happens to all of us. When I was in third grade, my mom insisted that I wear these really ugly boots to school. I tried arguing, but I always lost. So when I headed to the bus stop, I kept on the dreaded boots until I was just out of sight, and then I left them in the crook of a tree. By seventh grade, my arguments with my mom revolved around these really expensive sneakers that she described as a waste of money. So, right now, I want you to pause the video and think about an argument that you've had this year. When you have your idea, go ahead and jot it in your notebook, in your writing notebook, and then come back to the video. Think about what did you argue about and how did it go? Here's the thing, writers. This unit will help you become extraordinarily skilled at argument so that you can advocate for yourself, so you can be convincing and compelling. You might not win every argument, but I want you to be heard. Writers, there are also arguments that are not personal, arguments that involve middle school students across the nation or the world. Is it okay to have cell phones in school? Should animals be allowed in school? Should kids wear uniforms? Should schools start later in the morning? I'm going to suggest that we take up another issue, one that is being debated all over the country. Should kids be involved in competitive sports? You might be horrified by this question, and you're not alone. But the thing is, there is an argument that competitive sports can be harmful to kids. They create lots of pressure, kids get left out, and sports injuries are a big deal. Try to imagine how that side of the argument might go. But you also need to keep in mind that arguments can be made for competitive sports. They teach the value of hard work and of teamwork, and they make for healthy living. I bet you can imagine that side of the argument too. Writers, people all around the country are talking about this issue. Some places have decided not to keep score in kids' sports. This issue involves you. You are a stakeholder. So let your voices be heard. Let's see how you influence this decision. Today, I want to teach you that when taking sides in an argument, it is important to start by weighing the reasons and evidence offered up by both sides, remaining open, suspending judgment so as to develop a considered opinion. And even that opinion, that position, is a preliminary one. Today, you'll begin researching sides of the issue of competitive sports for kids. That means you'll want to figure out the reasons and evidence that support different viewpoints, learning about the opinions of people who think differently than you do, and learning also about the evidence people draw on to support their positions. You'll need to take notes because once you do settle on a preliminary position, you'll need to be able to engage in a debate for that position, citing substantial evidence, not just talking about gut feelings. Right now, think about how you will take and organize your notes. Two tips. First, you won't want to jumble the evidence for and evidence against the issue into the same big pile. Think about how to distinguish evidence for, evidence against, and information that is neither for nor against, but is still relevant. And second, Remember that you will need to move your evidence around. You'll rank which evidence is the most important, discard the least important, and figure out ways to sequence your points. So you need to invent a way to take notes that allows you to move your points around. So, how will you take notes? You could use index cards, big post its, staplers, and paper for making temporary booklets that you could deconstruct later. Some of you like to work on your computers where you might take notes. Some of the articles that you'll be reading also have extra large margins in case you want to annotate your copy of the articles and then staple them into your notebook later or take pictures for your notes. So, what will be your plan? I'm going to set up my notes this way. You can do so as well or use some other system. Here, let's label one page of the notebook pros and the page across from it cons. And we should also have a category for other in case there are facts about sports in general that we might want to save and use. For this next part, you'll need a copy of the article Listening to Wisdom from a 10-year-old Son About a Head Injury. Go ahead and pause the video and make sure that you have this article in front of you. Here's a tip. To get ready to read, it helps to think right away what pros and cons does this author reveal. Often, the title of an article tells you what side the author suggests. And if the title contains the word or, like competitive sports are harmful or helpful, usually the last alternative is the one the author suggests, because the author will want to end by talking about her choice. So often, the title will help you glean the position. But sometimes discerning the position an article takes is harder, partly because the author offers some details to support both sides. Listening to wisdom from a 10-year-old son about his head injury. So, do you think this piece will mostly support the pro position that competitive sports are good for kids? Do you think it will support the con position? Or do you think it might have some evidence to support both pro and con? The title isn't crystal clear on the author's position, right? It may lay out both sides, so we aren't able to be sure whether our notes will go on one side of the chart or another. Let's see. I'm going to take notes on post its. You will want to take notes as you read as well. And you might want to use the same collecting technique, take some post its. Otherwise, take notes in your writing notebook or on your computer. I'll give you a moment to get ready to take notes. So now we are going to read closely and be alert to evidence or ideas that inform the argument. We'll pause often to record especially important evidence. I'm going to start reading. You'll want to follow along with your article that you have in front of you. Dad, I'm scared. I only have one brain and I don't want to hurt it playing football. My son Will, his 10-year-old eyes filling with tears, was trying to decide whether to play quarterback in his Pee Wee game against Roosevelt Elementary. 10 days earlier, he'd taken a helmet to helmet hit during practice and possibly, although we really don't know, sustained a concussion. Now I wanted to help him make the right choice, if only I knew what that was. For several years, I have been following the furor of football and head injuries. I've become all too familiar with accounts of NFL veterans exhibiting Alzheimer's like symptoms in their 40s, of teenagers dying after playing too soon after a concussion. But these tragedies didn't seem very relevant to my own life until Will took his first big hit. I wasn't there, but he told me afterward that he went to the sideline to lie down. He thinks one of the coaches checked on him, but he can't remember because he fell asleep. He fell asleep. Isn't that the first thing they tell you to avoid in a head injury situation? Was this a moment I've been dreading since his mother grudgingly and I excitingly told him that yes, he could play tackle football? Okay, let's pause and take a minute to jot your notes, what you've learned so far in terms of evidence, and then come back to this teaching video. So, the fact that any teenagers die while playing competitive sports seems pretty important to the con side, doesn't it? I'm jotting that down and some of the other evidence too. I think it is scary that 10-year-old kids who have head injuries are left to fall unconscious on the sidelines of a game. Do you see that I'm filling these notes in the con side, even though nothing in the text explicitly said this shows competitive sports are bad? You have to do the thinking work yourself. So, do you see what we did so that you could do this work on your own? We took in the information from the text, thought about which side of the debate it helped, and we had to really think about it. It wasn't always obvious. Then we jotted that information onto the correct section of our notes so that we can use it later when we write our arguments. I know that none of you are sure yet what position you'll take in this debate, but you need to collect the information that this author presents to document this perspective, whether or not it matches with your own initial gut feelings. We're not quite done because I want you to try this with one more article before you start working independently. So go ahead and make sure that you have the article, get off that couch and play, and then go back to the lesson platform for part 2 of this video lesson.